is the industry leader in both service and unique events in the TCG arena. Whether it's running the largest community-run tournaments for Flesh and Blood or providing service with a generosity that is unique to the Realm games, you can count on the Realm for an unforgettable experience. Check out their website at realmgamingnetwork.com for details about their $50,000 Flesh and Blood tournament circuit happening all across North America. But check out everything else going on at the Realm, including tournaments for all kinds of other experiences. And just for you, ISP listeners, use the code INSTANT5, that's INSTANT 5, to get 5% off your checkout when you're buying from the Realm. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode number 121 of the Instant Speed Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the Realm Games. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Really?
Yes.
Have you studied, or are you just such a super fan?
I'm a frequent listener.
Oh, okay. Did you get your tote
Frequent
bag?
listener, first-time caller, that sort of thing?
No, you are definitely not a first-time caller. I've forgotten how many times you've actually been on the show, and it was something that I even suspected. Maybe I shouldn't even do show notes because you're such a veteran.
I was curious if you were going to send show notes or not. You sent them this morning, and I was like, oh, hey, show notes.
Yeah.
We don't need those.
I'm a professional. I'm a professional journalist, is what
True.
I tell the cops. Not customs, though.
No, not customs. I was going to say, you should have told that to customs. Maybe they would have let you in.
Definitely not. We're still working on that. But yeah. Welcoming to the show, my better half, I think so. Needs no further introduction. I'm just reading what I wrote. Well, but welcome, Stephen Cookus, also known as DM Armada. Welcome to the show, my friend.
It's good to be here. I'm happy to be here. We're having a good time.
Well, we are. And I was actually going to ask you to open the show whether you were still playing Hearthstone Battlegrounds. And you were, because that's what we were waiting for you to finish before we started recording. And we were talking about an undead build that you were building.
Yeah, that's literally what we were doing. I apologized profusely for making you wait an extra 10 minutes as I got third place in the lobby.
Top 4 is a win. That counts.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of seconds. I'm not going to lie. I've been getting a lot of seconds. Second place, always the bridesmaid, feels kind of bad. So I feel like I want to just press my luck and go for first next time. Just like go for the crazy build.
So for those who are unaware, I recently got Steven back into Hearthstone Battlegrounds. It's kind of what I play while I have videos rendering, where I can't really mess around with things. So the video rendering usually is about 20 to 30 minutes. So I'll just play that while it's happening, and make like thumbnails and stuff on the side. But it's not just you. I know that Roger Bodie has been in my ear several times in the past month about getting back into it. I've been talking to my good friend Nathan Zamora, aka Admirable, about playing more Hearthstone and things like that. I'm just enjoying it. It was what got me back into card games a long time ago, like when the game came out 10 years ago by now.
Yeah.
So
crazy. We
are going to be doing, I'll just put you on blast right here. We are doing a little mini contest, you and I, and whoever else wants to join, when the new season of Battlegrounds begins. Whoever can end the season for next season with the highest score. We haven't decided stakes yet. But maybe it's just stakes. Maybe we just...
Maybe it's just stakes. I like that, actually. I like that. Next time we get to do an event together or go to an event together, that person gets stakes.
Deal. Is that fair?
That seems fun. Yeah, let's do that. Heck yeah. I mean, at worst, I'm buying my good friend Flake a steak dinner. And at best, he's buying me a steak dinner.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Come on.
I think
that's a win-win.
All right. Well, are we digitally shaking on this one?
Yes, 100%.
Digital shake. It's done.
There it is.
There it is. All right. Well, let's get to some business before we get to the topic. Last week on the show, I asked you, the savvy listener, if you can go ahead and drop in the comments for our weekly $10 gift certificate giveaway. Are they even called gift certificates anymore? I guess it's just store credit. But at the Realm Games, Last week I asked you, what format would you want Worlds to be? And the winner is Playtime TCG, saying, I think to win Worlds you should be good at all of the 1v1 formats. Commoner, Blitz, Draft, Sealed, CC, and Living Legend. That is a very robust schedule, Playtime TCG, but get in touch with me. I've got a code for you, a $10 store credit at therealmgamingnetwork.com. So reach out to me via Twitter, via Discord, however else, and I will get you that. What would yours be? What would your ideal Worlds schedule be?
The ideal one? You know what? I know it sounds crazy, but I don't think that's terribly far off. I think it would be cool to have CC limited, probably just draft. But what did Worlds 1 do? Was it sealed and draft, or was it just draft?
It was draft, Blitz, CC.
Okay, so as close to as we can get to Worlds number 1, I thoroughly enjoyed that, and that's probably what I would run back. But at the same time, like, I don't mind it just being 2 formats because it allows us to watch more of the main format, which is Classic Constructed, or it allows us to watch more Constructed. And I actually enjoy watching Blitz because I think Blitz is fun.
There's always this discourse about, like, you know, I am very much a staunch believer in the fact that if you want to be the best in the world, you need to prove it in limited and in constructed, because it's not like one of them is this fringe thing. It's not this casual, you know, once in a blue moon, some LGS will have a tournament for it. It's draft. It's very much part of the fabric of the DNA of card gaming these days. It's what people are focused on. But at the same time, the way I kind of envision this is that every single major tournament that's been mixed has been decided by CC in top 8. Like, that is the pinnacle. That is the flagship. But I'm a 2-format person for Worlds. I don't think Blitz is bad. I just think that if you want to, you know, prove who the best is, you need to prove from a constructed standpoint, which CC is the flagship. It's the crown jewel. And the other one is you got to put your wits about you about doing something from a limited perspective. And to me, that's draft. I think that draft is the best skill expression when it comes to the limited format. I think that they got it spot on.
I tweeted out, I think when the original discourse of like split format versus just Classic Constructed or Constructed in general was a thing, I tweeted out that if we really wanted to push this, we need to go like full bore, and we need to include UPF, and we need to include like Commoner and that sort of thing. So I feel Playtime TCG's sentiment, and I think if we wanted to go full bore, we could do some stuff. We could just add every format that could possibly exist into that sequence. But honestly, though, I kind of agree with you. I think it's most enjoyable to watch limited being draft and Classic Constructed, as it kind of allows, from a viewer standpoint, the ability to track it a little bit more easily, right? You're not having to go, okay, what are we in? What's today? Today's 2 rounds of Blitz, a round of draft, like 3 games of draft, and then CC to finish. It's like that's kind of confusing. So just having 2 formats makes sense.
2's enough. I think that's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's move on a little bit about what this episode is going to be a little bit about. When I sort of flagged you down last week and said, hey, you want to do the show, there was a motive behind it, which kind of, you know, circles back to a lot of the discourse that you and I have had, that I've had with other people I trust, which is the overall sentiment, I suppose, the climate of discussion, of discourse amidst the Flesh and Blood community has, I'm going to just say it's soured over a little while. And, you know, you could tell that we got out of the holiday season, and then Heavy Hitters was a big success. I don't think there's much debate about that, but where is all this negativity coming from? And that's where I think it's worth a discussion, because everybody can agree that Heavy Hitters was an excellent set. It revitalized the draft and the limited portion. It was a good set overall. It was commercially and critically well received. They just announced a bigger tournament scene for 2024. They said we're going to Japan. We're touching that market, second biggest market. They just, a couple months ago, they released this news segment where James talked about the financials, about how the company's doing exceptionally well. There's good people there. It's primed for growth. They owe nobody any allegiance, no shareholders tugging at their strings. Yet if you would never know that based off of the conversations that you see on the Twitter machine.
True.
What's up with that?
100%.
What is up with that?
Oh, what do I just have to divine the secrets? I don't know. I think there's a lot of things. I think it's a very nuanced thing. I think you touched on a couple of things. One, people were coming out of a sort of a drought, perhaps in the holiday season, that you can kind of just decide on if that's what you believe or not. And they move into what is a good set, but eventually you get bored of things, right? And when people get bored, they need to look for something to do. And I think there's an interesting aspect of trading card games in that there's always going to be some amount of discourse and or just unrest about specific things. And this happens for a lot of reasons. And I'm sure you can attest to it, having played many card games and continuing to play many card games. But there's a general belief of like, I want my thing to be the thing that does well, and I hate it when it's not. And therefore, I have a problem with XYZ because it's not the thing I like to do in the card game. And so I'm going to take to a very easy to grasp format in social media, and I'm going to air my grievances. Like that's the sort of easy format to follow. And I don't want to bury the lead too much, but I know there's a couple of topics that we might cover down the road that I think point us more in that direction and give us more credence to actually go down that path. But I think that's generally what it is people, they care enough about the game that they want to talk about the thing that irks them. And so they're going to air that out as often as possible, especially when there's not enough like meat on the bone when it comes to like low hanging fruit. And this is not a knock at Magic the Gathering, like in general, but Magic the Gathering is going through, or has, I guess, went through things that led to a lot of like player unrest. Those types of situations are easy to point at and go, well, I know why we're complaining because this thing is happening and I don't agree with it. But when you don't necessarily have a company that's, doing those types of things and dropping the ball in certain very obvious ways, because I don't think LSS is dropping the ball, you got to find something to talk about. And guess that something's going to be that my hero's not powerful enough, and therefore this thing is too powerful.
Yeah. And like, I think that needs to be addressed to a certain degree because, I mean, you brought, Magic the Gathering into the conversation, and it's fair because a lot of the times, a lot of the criticism that it will garner will be these massive decisions or these relatively big decisions that they make along the lines of like, hey, we're going to do this like Universes Beyond thing, so we're going to pair up with other IPs. And that can be rather tilting for some players. Other things being cost of product, frequency of releases, things like that. That has a significant effect on the wallets of the people playing it. This just seems like, I'm going to just go through a little bit of a list of the things that have basically taken the spotlight over the course of a month or so. So we've gone from Kano is unreasonably OP, is bad for the game, is the epitome of poor gameplay, and is gonna kill the game. Before that was Frostbite. Frostbite was the worst thing ever. Before that, Codex of Frailty is the worst thing that has ever existed. This one was new. Scabskin leathers suddenly out of nowhere, just like the Undertaker from underneath the ring appeared and suddenly was like, "Hey, I'm the worst thing ever. I'm the worst." Oh my God, I'm the worst, and then disappeared the next day.
Sure.
And now it's Light Sentinel. Suddenly, new card, by the way, just came out. Completely awful, terrible, the worst thing ever. And so we've just gone through all of this basically manifested boredom, and that's where we're at now. And now that has been swept away because Light Sentinel was put to rest by none other than Kid Lethal himself, the boogeyman. Brody Spurlock appears. He's under your bed right now, probably. He's in your closet, just ready to pounce. He's everywhere. He was in Ontario randomly doing RTNs. But he put that to bed with Azalea, of all things. So at a certain point, Stephen, is this just sheer boredom? Is it legitimately clickbait boredom and just trying to drum up things? Because there's so many better conversation points to discuss, in my opinion.
No, I don't think it's boredom. I think what it is a combination of going back to the idea of I want to do my thing, and everything you mentioned makes my thing not as cool or not functional. Like, for example, I mean, going back down the list, okay, Frostbites, don't let me do my thing because I have to pay for them. That's not fun. Kano doesn't interact with me in the way that I want to when I play the game. That's not fun. Scabskins fundamentally breaks the way that I've set up a turn in like what my hero likes to do because they gain extra action points or whatever. And then counter to that, Light Sentinel takes away the action point that I want to use to play the game, right? So all of these things that people are like kind of bringing up and airing out is opposite of what they want to do in the game. And they're valid to think that. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's that in concert with the idea that these things are taking away the fun. Every hero in Flesh and Blood does a thing and should have the capacity to do something powerful. If we're taking those things away, then all we get are a bunch of heroes that are equal in power, perhaps, and very bland because of it. They don't have their like flashy thing. So I don't personally love the idea of like taking all these things away because it's not fun. I like, for example, Azalea's on hits are not fun to play against. Like having red in the ledger active and like dominated and then not being able to cover it up literally means you can do one thing on your turn. And if your hero's the opposite of doing one thing on their turn, it's like playing Warmonger's Diplomacy against you, right? That sucks for a lot of heroes.
That was another one. That was another card that was the end of the world, by the way. It was Warmonger's Diplomacy.
Right. Yeah. That being said, like at the same time, heroes should be able to do powerful and flavorful things, in my opinion. Otherwise, why are we playing the game and why aren't all the heroes just Ira? You know, like why is just incremental value numbers deck? So I think it's a little bit of combination of that with the idea, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, the idea that this is a very competitive game. We are playing a competitive-minded game. And when you're playing something with a competitive mindset, you as a player are more encouraged to talk about your bad beats, to talk about the things that are kind of like amiss within the state of the game. If everything was casual about this game, if everyone was playing from more of a casual sense, you may not have as much or as vitriolic of a discourse going on about every little thing. But because we're playing a competitive game, everyone that plays competitively is more apt to talk about said, problem, if there is one, on the internet. I think it's a combination of these things all being unique and game like changing to themselves, and then it being a competitive sphere that players are actively engaged in. And honestly, that's a good thing. Wouldn't you agree? Like players are playing the game. They clearly care about the game and they care about the gameplay side of it. And so they're talking about these cards that they are feeling deep down in are unfun or unfair to play against their specific thing. I don't agree with them, but I applaud their desire to go out and say it, because the opposite of that is apathy. And I don't think any game wants to be in a place where you're apathetic about the meta or the cards in the game.
Sure. Okay. So I want to kind of rewind a little bit on this, because what you say rings true. You're right. You want heroes to play differently, because otherwise it just becomes a game of math. And when it's a game of math, then it's so solvable and so boring and so whatever. You're totally right. The one thing that a lot of these things have in common is disruption and and just kind of throwing a wrench in the plans of what people want to be doing with their deck. But guess what? That is card games. And the problem about it is that I'm all for discourse, 100%. Tell me what you don't like about something. Tell me what bothers you. However, there's a fundamental leap, or this chasm-sized leap that people take when they go from I don't like this to this is the worst thing and this is bad for the game. That is the problem with this, because when you say that, hey, people are discussing these things and people are talking about it because they care, I agree, that's good. But I do not agree with the entire kind of saying that no press is bad press, because these are people who are out there beating the drum about how the game's going to die. This is the worst thing. It makes for a bad experience, and yada, yada, yada. Now, obviously, 99.9% of the people who are going to look at that are going to form their own opinions, and either they agree or not. But what about the casual person who's just like, oh, I'm not going to play Flesh and Blood because these cards exist, and apparently, according to so-and-so, it's the worst state it's ever been in. When in reality, I'm going to argue that the game is arguably in one of the best states it's ever been in terms of diversity, in terms of card interaction. Yeah,
100%.
So the issue there, I find, is that everybody just doesn't want to have anybody fiddle with their plans, and I agree, because it's annoying. But you know who's not complaining about this kind of stuff? The people who succeed. And I'm not saying this as a blanket statement to cover everything, but the vast majority of people who are not complaining about Light Sentinel Loop, who are not complaining about Scabskin leathers or whatever, are the people who are top 8ing these major events, because if it is a problem, they are teching against it. This Light Sentinel Loop is something that has been around and known for a while. It's been known amidst the pros. Josh Lau, who was on the podcast a little while ago, who top-aided PTLA, had a plan for that. He brought Time Skipper boots in his Dorinthia deck because that's what he had in mind. He's like, I know that that's a thing, and I know that I have to tech against it, because in the off chance, I don't want to be blown out by this random long shot loop that didn't even win the game that set everyone off in Phuket or wherever this went down.
Yeah.
So that said, there is some harm to be had here. And at the root of it all, I genuinely believe, Stephen, that the people who are making these arguments are doing so, not everybody, but a decent part of them are like, you know what, I don't like this, but I know that if I go in as a 4-on-10 talking about this, it's not going to get the same amount of rustling up of commotion. So I've got to 10-on-10 this, and I've got to make sure that it's either okay or Armageddon Doomsday Clock at 2 minutes to midnight. There's no in between. That's the problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, I haven't seen that many lava takes, like the takes that are literally spontaneously combusting. I have seen a lot of people just sort of nickel and diming a topic and then like retweeting said topic and adding to it, and I feel like perhaps that sort of starts to stack up on itself and kind of build. If you're following it and reading it and constantly kind of going back to it, it sort of builds in your psyche as if the world is on fire. But I haven't seen any of those molten hot takes where someone's literally like, I don't know what, Scabskins is the death of Flesh and Blood. Like, I haven't seen that take being presented, but I've seen a lot of Scabskins is fundamentally bad for the game. I don't agree with it, but I don't know. I mean, like, if you're having a well-reasoned conversation about it, I don't mind it. But I do think you're right. Like, if someone comes out with that crazy take of like, literally Light Sentinel has killed Flesh and Blood, I'm done, I'm quitting, this game makes no sense anymore. I mean, the card's been around since Monarch, and then a loop got set up like last year. Like, you could have looped it last year in a hero that's honestly underserved and probably just fine in the meta.
Yeah,
I feel like that's the take that is the most damaging. But like I said, I haven't seen those, but that's me anecdotally just on social media.
There are decks that exist in every single card game. I know this because having played Gwent for 5 years, there were some very funky combos that you could pull off that were you would pull it off 1 out of 5 games, and it would win you 1 out of 10 games. But it wasn't a fundamentally sound and ladder worthy kind of combo. It was just a cool thing to do that if your opponent was not wise to it, you would basically win that game if you were left to your own devices to pull that off. But it's not like it was something like Hearthstone is egregious with this, where you could just lose the game with full life and they just blast you for 30 damage out of their hands and you can't do anything about it. That's the way to go. OTK. It's not like Flesh and Blood's the same way. You will see the symptoms and before you get the diagnosis of what the hell is happening to you, and you are able to respond and work on it. And I don't want to be the person to go ahead and hammer the get good button, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is
get good.
Well, I'm saying just maybe understand why it's happening and that it's not broken, because like this is what really irks me about this kind of stuff, is that because something beat you, therefore it is too good for the game, or it is too overpowered because it beat you. That is arrogance to the highest degree. Sometimes it's like, you know what? I lost to this. It's not what's wrong with the card. It's what's wrong with how I played. And then you evaluate and you go back and you look it over and you try to figure it out. And you know what? If the discussion goes back and you're like, there is absolutely no way to stop this, then it's a problem. But if that were the case, the top 8 would have been 8 Prisms, or 8 Kanos, or 8 whoever the hell's using Scabskin leathers at the time, or 8 Rangers, based on whatever's the most OP nonsense at that particular time.
Sure.
I truly believe, Stephen, that there's a certain amount of, call it what you want. I don't think it's laziness. I just think that it's just a sheer stubbornness to not want to improve their own game, not because they're incapable. Maybe it's a time constraint, maybe it's something else, but and everybody has that. But at the end of the day, it's not it's like it's a very much a look within moment that nobody wants to actually address.
I feel like that's pervasive about life at times.
Yeah.
But it's very apparent in card games and very apparent in Flesh and Blood when that is the case, because it's a game that wears its complexity on its sleeve, right? It's a game that is very obviously complex and detail oriented, or detail encouraging, and you can see very quickly whether or not the decision that you made is going to have long-term ramifications. And I feel like people perhaps have their own preconceived notions about how the game should function, and when it does not function the way that they want, they are not, perhaps some people are not quick to try and change their preconceived notions, and instead they just want it to go back in the box that they see fit, because they can calculate it in the box.
See, and part of what I love to see is innovation. I think that the fact that some of these decks have innovated and changed how they play and have found new ways to do things and finding new combos, I think that's a great thing. I know that, moving into Pro Tour, some of the cool deck brews I saw that didn't quite actually make it to past the finish line as being the deck of choice for certain teams that I discussed with and I saw practice. And I'm not going to say what those decks are, because I don't know if they're in their back pocket for future things, but there are some of the decks that I'm like, I have never seen that happen, or I have never seen a deck operate like this. And it was fascinating. And their logic and their conclusion wasn't, it wasn't something along the lines of like, well, this is busted and this is broken, this is a problem. It was, we are still looking at new ways to make these cards interact in unique ways. And part of that is kudos to this Light Sentinel loop that is broken, can be busted, can be countered. But if you're not willing to devote a sideboard or two to beating a deck, then what the hell is your sideboard for? And that's kind of part of it. And look, I am all for innovation and whatnot, because that's how the games grow and how they get better, and that's how you entice new people to do things. I think that if it just came back down to it and it's just like, well, we've got 4 classes and we're just going to find new ways to put 7 damage on a 3-cost card, like at a certain point you're like, well, you run out of room to really produce new cards.
It's true. You mentioned that right after they spoiled the new 7 attack. Did you see that?
Yes. I forgot what it's called, but it's a
Battlefield Battlefront Bastion.
Yes, which is, I think if it's the only card blocking on a chain link, prevent the next one damage that would go through. It's just pretty interesting. I mean, it's like it's a 2-block that carries over and covers a Kodachi, you know?
Yeah.
You know what it is?
Stops the rune chant, stops the point of arcane.
It's a worse Findle's Fighting Spirit, in my opinion.
You could think of it that way, sure. Yeah, it doesn't gain you the life, but it kind of gains you the life. But it has to block by itself.
Yeah, it's got, but otherwise it's just blocking. That's like a 3-block. Maybe it is better. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not a doctor. What do I know?
I think it's cool. I think it's a cool way to like tweak a little, like pull a little lever, tweak a little thing. I think it's cool.
I'm going to be completely honest with you here. One of the things I worry about when it comes to the longevity of Flesh and Blood is the generics. I am worried about if they are going to sort of have to really press the thumb down on keeping power creep in check, then they're going to run out of space to create interesting cards. And I'm not saying that they're like, oh, well, there's going to be nothing new, interesting, or whatever. But I've been a proponent of saying, hey, we need a new E-Strike, we need a new Command and Conquer, we need a new Scar for a Scar, we need some stuff. Like, we need some stuff. And I don't know. Like, I'm just glad I'm not the one designing it, because every time
I was gonna say,
right, because every time a set comes out, I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting, that's pretty cool. But like the from heavy hitters, there wasn't really anything from the generic pool that really blew people away. There might be Tenacity, I think, is one of them.
Tenacity's really good.
Tenacity
is very good.
But Marching Order was the one everybody was like, you got to get your hand on your Marching Orders, because that one's, or Standing Order, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I play Standing Order in Blitz. I think it's fantastic in Blitz. It made its way into it made its way into Dromai. Of course, Dromai's about to rotate, but it made its way in there. It's honestly a really solid card. I think that card is quite fantastic. But again, because of the power level of the generics and because of the class cards that everyone has access to and those relative power levels, and each hero is unique and trying to do its own thing, cards nowadays almost have to fit into a very specific use case for them to actually make the cut in decks. Like, I mean, you look at all the cool cards that came out in heavy hitters for Warrior, right? Like all the engagement suite, and like the wage cards, and like all these things that you could tap into. And people are still playing like 3x Steelblade Supremacy and 3x Iron Song Response, and you're still playing all of your like very similar, like all the Blade Runners are still there because they've been around since Everfest. Like all the cards are so good already that like you have to create a very specifically good and powerful use case for those cards to cut the other ones out. And they're doing that, to their credit. LSS is doing that in the equipment slot. So they're proving that they can do it by printing something like Savage Sash, which does not do better than Fiendal's Spring Tunic, but it does something good enough that you could put it in your sideboard and you could swap it out in specific cases. So it would take a lot of doing probably for them to do the same thing in generics, but they've proven capable thus far.
Yeah. So let's wheel back here. We got some questions coming in. One of them is from our boy Blitzkrieg Meth asking, is there any part of the recent stream of discourse you actually agree with? Like Light Sentinel lock should be banned, Scabskins bad for the game, Kano's OP, etc., etc. Is there any of this discourse or chatter that we've seen for the past month or 6 weeks or so that you actually think has a decent amount of merit?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel like I was asked this question on Give and Take, which is like a little show that I do on my channel with my friends. And the question was posed to me: should a hero be able to present 40 damage on, within the game on a single turn? Like, should an OTK exist? And I think it was more specifically, should an OTK exist within the first few turns of the game? And my answer, I think the expected answer was no. My answer is yes. I think heroes should be able to do really powerful and memorable things. Not every single time, maybe once in a blue moon, but yes, if we take away the power level or the like very spiky and crazy cool moments, if we take those away from heroes by, for example, Kano is bad because he can kill you on your turn and do so from like a high life total. Yes, he can, and sometimes he can do that, and very often he can't. But if we take that away from the game, then what have we robbed players of? The opportunity to create some crazy memory and a talking point that could resonate, with a new player. Hey, y'all missed this crazy thing. I just dealt 35 damage in response because I got this off the top. It was insane. And if we're being honest, it probably won't happen again anytime soon. But man, was that a crazy moment. They're like, oh my God, I got to try that. That sounds amazing. Or I played this card that forced them to attack into it, and then I looped it infinitely into the deck until I won the game. Oh my God, you should have been there. And they'd be like, what? That exists? That's insane. This card, I got to try this. I got to figure out if I can do it. And of course, once in, like 100 games, you'll actually pull that off and win the game because of it. That's okay. That is totally okay in my book.
Yeah.
If it gets too consistent, then I have a problem with it. But everything that's been kind of talked back and forth about, I don't have a problem with, because I recognize that the best part about card games, in a lot of respects, is sharing like memories of crazy moments with your friends.
Absolutely. Like the memorable part of it is kind of cool. And I've heard a lot of these stories where it's like I was going to get killed the next turn. There was no way out of it. I had one out, and it was to do this.
Sigil of Solace off the top.
That's kind of like the pinnacle of exactly that. It's like you play to your outs. And this is what I always tell people is like, you're not dead if you have a percentage chance of winning. The difference is that you have to tailor your decision-making process to continuously aim towards that thing. It's like that scene in Apollo 13 where like they lose their navigation, so they're just aiming at the moon or Earth through that little porthole, and they're like, okay, if we lose it in the sight, we're done. It's like, if you just keep aiming the spaceship at that little picture of Earth, you'll get there. And the problem is it gets increasingly more difficult. Now, what you're saying, 40 points of damage off of a turn early in the game, I think it should be, much like you say, a very low percentage chance. I think that the way that many heroes kind of build towards a big burst turn is that they want to wear their opponent down, where they don't need the 1% chance. They're like, I've got a 50% chance here because you're at 25 and I still have my equipment, my tutors, I've got my 5-card hand. Sure. I just ate 20 damage off of you so I can try and pull this off. If you've got 2D reacts or that card in your arsenal is an unmovable or something, then I'm probably not going to make it happen. But the difference there is that, let's say you do manage to pull off that 35 or 40 point turn and you don't kill your opponent, what do you have left? Like, you probably blew a lot of equipment, a lot of powerful cards and combo pieces to get to that point. And if your opponent is insulated against that, like think of Charles Dunn at US Nats last year when he had that Briar list that just was a super defensive Briar. You're not going to bust past that. And he just took a different route. It's a very interesting conversation to have about like this OTK thing, because Kano's typically the first person to sort of catch that heat because he does it on your turn. However, I mean, Stubby Spy was a thing that was perfectly legal for a hot minute.
Combo Bolton exists still.
Yes.
That can put 40 damage on turn 1 as well by just drawing the right pieces. You have multiple opportunities to both play and also tutor out Lumina Ascension and just jam down triple Lumina. Like I've been triple Lumina on turn 2. That has happened to me in Classic Constructed. That exists. Is that a common occurrence? No. Do I recognize that I got a bad beat there? Yes. But is it going to happen every game? No, it's not going to happen every game. But is that a moment that I can talk about? Yes, because it exists in the game of Flesh and Blood, and removing that loses something, right? If we wanted to play chess, we can go play chess. That's a fundamentally different experience that has a lot more even matchup spread. I mean, like, I think it's 50-50. You can pick either the white pieces or the dark pieces, and your matchup spread into the field is solid. You're going to win 50% of the time or lose. Doesn't matter. Okay, but you can't say that about card games.
But are you banning Lumina Ascension?
No, I'm banning the pawn. I think it's too powerful.
Well,
the fact that you can en passant is broken. Okay,
you get 8 of them. Like, that's insane.
En passant's insane. So we need to ban that. The knight is just wrong. The fact that it can move in a 7 or an L shape, that breaks the fundamental tenets of chess. It should not be able to jump over other pieces. Ridiculous.
Welcome to the chess podcast.
No, I'm not banning any of those. I don't think any of them should be removed from the game.
I agree.
I think all have a good spot, and the only way I would change my stance on that is if someone beats me with it. And then immediately I will take to Twitter and I will post how I am done with the game because I got beaten by it. That's the only way. So.
As you should. That is the best place. The problem is I find is that there has literally just been this, as with every card game, and having been in the industry, same thing with you. I've heard it with every single card game that I've ever been around. It's dead game. Game's going to die. This is going to kill it. Blah, blah, blah. And you know what? We're still here. We're still here. We're still printing sets. We're still making money. We're still having a good time. We're still playing the game at a high level very frequently all over the freaking world. And I wrote
It's going to hit 5 years. It's going to be a 5-year mark in October.
It's crazy.
It'll hit 5 years.
Which is phenomenal, first of all, which is great. Most businesses kind of just go the way of the dodo, like within the first 2 or 3 years, especially with card games and such. Mm-hmm. It's ultimately just a great thing. And I wrote an article for MinMax Games about sort of addressing a little bit about this. It was literally hot off the heels of Brian Gottlieb saying that he's done with talking to the community about the game because it cannot be done within a state of reason. And what I mentioned in that article was essentially everybody who is talking about all these cards that have existed for so long and how they're going to destroy the game and how they can do it better. They weren't there when Welcome to Wraith was designed. They may have played it when it came out, but they weren't there when it was designed. They weren't there when Arcane Rising was designed, or Crucible of War, or Monarch, or any of that. They weren't in the room then. They're not in the room now. And it's the same person who's designing this game back then who is designing it today. So I don't understand where this lack of trust has gone, because cards like Scabskin Leathers are 5 years old, friends. And Kano is 4.5 years old. So why now? Why now? And I understand new cards come in, but if you are attacking these cards because the fundamental basis of what those cards do is, in your opinion, fundamentally wrong and breaks the game and is just not good for the health of the game, well, I hate to tell you, the card hasn't changed for 5 years. So I don't understand where this comes from. You weren't designing the game then. You were not designing the game today. And it's not that your opinion is not valid or not warranted, but the doomsaying and the mistrust and the sort of smoke and mirrors that goes around this has not only just worn out my mute button on Twitter, but at the same time, it has now driven away some very prominent voices within the development roster at LSS to the degree of Brian Gottlieb released a statement saying, "I'm done with the discourse on Twitter. It's bad for my mental health. Nobody is like, it's equal parts reasonable discourse and unreasonable yelling. And from now on, I'm not going to partake. I'm more proud, and I echo this. He says he's most proud of his work as he's ever been, and he hears that in person to the people who he talks to. And from now on, any discourse about the game will either come from an article he prints or an official interview he grants through whatever medium. That is a massive, pardon my language, a massive fucking loss to this community. And I kind of am a little bit disappointed that one of the most accessible people, like, you don't know what you got till it's gone kind of thing. Well, it's not like it was hidden away. It was always there to answer questions and be part of the conversation, and people threw that in the garbage. It's such a minor tragedy that you had access to the person who creates the cards that you play with, who is answering your questions very, in a
professionally to some,
and in depth,
some points,
and you just threw it away. It's such a shitty thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. At the same time, like, was it always going to happen down the road as the game grows? I would argue the game is still growing, and at some point, do we hit the point where it's like, okay, this game has gotten so big that I no longer can function by doing said thing? Like, name me another game where, like, the developer is actively answering, like, questions and assuaging fears on social media on a game that's this big. I can't think of one. I look and play a lot of games. I look at and play a lot of games, but I can't think of that many that are that active. And so to me, it was always something that I thought of as very unique. And at some point, I don't know how sustainable it would be. And unfortunately, the sustainability ran out from discourse rather than just full expansion. You know what I mean? Like, my thought was that the game gets so big that eventually there's just too many questions to answer or too many hot takes to kind of like echo or comment on, that eventually there's just not enough bandwidth. And instead it's less that and more like, all right, we're being unreasonable about too many things, and I'm put in a position too often where I have to almost Sophie's choice in this conversation of like, the game is this or the game is that, and there's no true middle ground or truth behind it. Like, that's the unfortunate part to me, that it falls there.
Yeah. But the part about this is that you're right to mention the fact that where else is this possible? People who design cards, such as, at the certain degree or the position that Brian Gottlieb is designing, like in Magic, someone like Mark Rosewater, for example. If you want a discussion with Mark Rosewater, I don't remember the last time I seen him on a podcast or whatever. Brian did like 2 or 3 podcasts this week,
Yeah, he did.
So he's still out there discussing, talking, doing these kinds of things. But people like Mark Rosewater, if you want insight, he'll have blog posts or something, or he might reply to a question on an official forum, but never to the degree or to the clarity that someone like Brian was doing. Other devs from other games, like if you see a reply to a tweet regarding a Hearthstone nerf or scheduled expansion or whatever, and there's not a clear answer, just a hint at something that might come, like for example, like, or is Warrior gonna get buffs on this particular set, and the reply from one of the devs might be something along the lines of, we're looking at some classes to get buffs, and then boom, that's a podcast episode right there, just off that tweet, because it's such a big deal for that kind of accessibility. You don't know what you got till it's gone is so apropos here, because I have been involved in so many different games and I've never had that kind of access. And yes, Brian's my friend, but it has nothing to do with that. It also has to do with the fact that I'm just looking at his replies to various levels of discourse about the game, and he will get questions in one of his tweets and he'll reply to them, and he'll do it in detail. And now that's gone because it's and like, as somebody whom, like, I know Brian doesn't care or mind, rather, if you disagree with him. But it's the type of exchanges that have just soured him. And then Kasharn, like Cash, who is responsible for your live blogs, responsible for a lot of articles that are uncredited or sometimes on the sites, also handles a lot of the FabTCG Twitter account and stuff like that. He himself has also said, I'm out of this. Like, I can't be a part of this Twitter discourse. It's like, it's unfortunate. And I'll be completely real with you here, Stephen. I think I've only said this to one other person. If I can get off Twitter, I would. I absolutely 100% would. I do it because it is an exceptional and free marketing tool. And that isn't to say that I do not cherish and enjoy a lot of the conversation and exchanges that I have on there. And I have a lot of friends, but you know what? It is a lot of anxiety. It's a lot of miscommunication, of misread signals back and forth, of, oh, but they put a period after this, or there wasn't a smiley, so that means that, like, it has just kind of devolved into something. And what you said, I think, is true. That to a point, this is the unfortunate consequence of success and growth.
Yeah, it is. Let me ask you this, though. Is there ever a world where this reverses itself? Is there ever a solution? Or is this the burned bridge that you can never cross again?
Are you talking about if, like...
For example, for Brian and Kasharn and anyone like in a position of development for a game, is there ever a world or a way or a solution for those members to be part of the community in the way that they were before? Or is this like the really bad breakup that everyone's experienced, where they may show back up and you both nod politely and you exchange pleasantries, but it's never quite the same? Like, what world are we living in, Flake?
I honestly think that, I mean, there's always a world for reconciliation. If I didn't believe in that, then I would never leave the house. Like, I truly believe that there has to be room for reconciliation, for improvement. That's just how I live my life. I make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and I do my best to own them and move on and improve. That's just what we try to do. The problem here is that it's not necessarily about a person returning and like pulling the George Costanza like they never left, you know, like, oh, just go back and pretend you never left. It's just that, what's the point? Because it's not going to, the overall sentiment is not going to change. The bigger this gets, the louder the negativity becomes, because it's like, oh, if the game grew by 1 million players and 1% of them were unhappy, that's 10,000 voices, if my math is correct. Sure. It's 10,000 voices of people who are pissed off about it, because the other 990,000 are playing the game and having a good time and not worrying about entering this discourse or not part of it or not participating. But still, 10,000 voices is a lot of volume. It's a lot of noise, and it's unfortunate because one of those voices was the person making the game who
Sure.
desperately wants the game to continue on that trajectory of improvement, of growth, of innovation. But all they're hearing is that the ghosts of the past, the card that beat them in one armory one time, is the worst thing that has ever occurred. And therefore, it's not just about being upset at that one game. I need to take it out on the person who printed that card 5 years ago. Like, it's...
Yeah. And I do want to point this out. I feel like we're both hitting on the fact that this is sort of an unfortunate inevitability of success and growth. This moving away from being this ready and able to communicate and discuss, you know, development and the processes that go into the creation of this game. It seems like we're hitting on that point. But but I don't want to. I don't want us to drop the ball in saying that because it's sort of inevitable that the growth is going to lead to a disconnect there, that we don't, as a community, have a responsibility to just be kind to others and to speak with a lot of well-reasoned arguments and well thought out and measured responses. Like, I feel like, yes, the game is growing, and yes, more voices mean that you're gonna at some points have complaints with the game. It's not a perfect world. It's not even a perfect game. I think we're all good saying that. But the way that you go about speaking about it and not being toxic about said process, that's the important point that I feel like the community needs to reevaluate and revisit how we go about talking about it. It's not that we shouldn't talk about it. Toxic positivity is just as terrible as constant toxicity about the minor negatives of an experience. But how you go about airing said grievances and the words that you use to express those, that's a big deal. Making it a 10 out of 10 when it's really far down the totem pole, like you talked about earlier, is the problem.
So I love to have the discussion. Like, a lot of the times, the first thing I want to get to know when someone has a take like something is why. Because no one will explain why they have the particular negative take that they have. It's like, why? Why is Kano OP? Why is this bad? Like, why is it unfair? Why is it this? And the if I ever get a response or an explanation, it's usually a very solvable problem, which is, well, they can kill you on your turn and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, there is something you can do about it. There is. So let's just put that to bed. But what I find more often than not, it's that pride enters the argument sphere, enters the arena, and that is your champion. And you cannot have a scratch on that. So you will throw yourself in front of it to protect it, and you might say ridiculous things. You might say things that make no sense, and you might do it for clicks. You might do it for views. You might do it for vanity. You might do it for clout. You might do it for whatever it is. But the fact remains is that there is a consequence there. And the consequence might not be as far-reaching as you might initially perceive, but it adds up. And we just saw one of it get tallied up recently this past week or two because Brian Gottlieb said, enough of this shit. All I did was work hard and try to give you accessibility and improve your access to the game, and now that's gone. And the repercussions of that is another thing that I think is going to be felt down the line, because the next time that there's something that people have a legitimate gripe about, who are you going to have a conversation with, or who are you going to get clarity from at within a 24-hour sort of turnaround as we have before? Because when a card was something that popped up, or when there was an element that people freaked out about, and part of it honestly was people bitching about draft being a part of major tournaments and deciding. And
we didn't even talk about that.
We did not. I had a whole episode about it last week with Yuki and Tarek, right? And part of that discussion, who enters the arena? It's Brian Gottlieb. Brian Gottlieb, professional card player for many, many years. More successful than 99% of the people who are listening to that, us included. And
I was going to say, he's pretty successful too.
Exceptionally successful. Yeah. And comes in and just simply tweets, hey, I think it's time people just got good at limited. And without even seeing that tweet, I also tweeted, I said, I think it's time that people just realize that this is part of competitive Flesh and Blood. So it's not, maybe the efforts complaining should be better used preparing. And that was his take, which then was supported, and like there was a big conversation thread with that, which he participated in. We don't have that anymore. So the whole conversation, when something is a legitimate concern, and because I truly believe that the conversation of limited within competitive Flesh and Blood, I think that was a conversation of merit, and I think that was something to be had. And who better to have it than the person who's creating the game, who designs these draft sets and has all this stuff involved, Now he's not part of it. So the next time something occurs, what if they do have worlds, Steve? And what if the worlds is, oh, you know what? We're doing Blitz and Living Legend. And, well, why? What's up with that? What the hell? Blah, 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 blah. Radio silence. Radio silence until maybe they release an article about it 2 or 3 weeks later. Meanwhile, the entire forest is burned down because somebody decided to throw their cigarette in a pile of leaves. You know, like that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I think that is a possibility. I will say to their credit, I don't think LSS is that poor at their communication. I feel like they're even if you're taking away the direct communication on social media, I think LSS does a good job of communicating their decision-making process or their thought process behind things. But yeah, no, I agree. That's a possibility, however remote it is. I don't think you're going to get a Blitz and Living Legend.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I tried to come up with
something interesting.
But I wanted to bring up an example that would, you know, be a valid reason for a community outcry of this is kind of ridiculous. But the fact is that people were bitching about draft as a format within like a major tournament but it's been part of it since 2021 Worlds in San Jose, like 3 and 2.5 years, 3 years. So it's been there. And if you haven't done that, that's on you. It's because it's been there.
Well, there should be room for people to talk about things that they feel could be improved within the game of Flesh and Blood.
Agreed.
For example, if you feel that the best way to discover who is the best at Flesh and Blood is not to play limited and to open yourself up to the RNG of, you know, like someone nuking your pod because they sat next to you and didn't follow the instructions of the, you know, read the signals and that crap, which is such a stupid ass argument. But if you feel like that is taking away from your dominance in the game of Flesh and Blood, you're wrong, first of all. And 2, like, people are proving that you're wrong. And 3, you should have the ability to say that in a well-reasoned manner. The problem is that people aren't necessarily doing that at all times, and they're allowing their feelings to get in the way of the way that they present their perhaps very well-reasoned and correct argument. Like, it could be correct to say that limited has no place in Flesh and Blood's highest level of competitive play. Like, you could say that. I don't believe that, but you could try to make a well-reasoned and impassioned argument and convince someone that Flesh and Blood is its premier format, and that is the pinnacle of achievement. That is how you should prove that you're the best Flesh and Blood player. Again, you and I don't agree with that, but you can have an argument where you could put that out there in a very eloquent and non-toxic way. And people should have the right to do that. But are they doing that?
One of the best lessons I ever learned when it came to something similar to this was not even something that was meant to be a lesson. I was playing pool with a friend of mine who was very bad at pool, and I was pretty decent at the time. It was like in college, or like I used to play a lot when I was in college, right? So I was pretty good, and I played against my friend. And my friend's whole thing, he was like 3 or 4 pints deep. His whole thing was he would just hit the cue ball at another ball as hard as he can without aiming. And he didn't care where the balls went. He would just hit it, and then if something went in, something went in. And he beat me in a game. And I got so mad. And he's like, "Why are you mad?" I said, "Because that's not how you're supposed to play." And he's like, "But I won. So who was right and who was wrong?" And I said, "Shit, you're right." I said, "You could still play poorly, but that's not on you. It's not it's not your fault. It's like, it's on me for not playing better to beat you." And it's the same thing with these draft pods and that whole argument of like, well, if the person to my right doesn't know how to draft, well, you know what? They're at the Pro Tour, mofo, so they must be knowing how to do something right. You're in the same pod as them, so clearly your records are the same. So maybe it's not on you. Maybe they figured it out. Maybe their whole thing is, if I nuke the pod, then everybody's at a disadvantage, and suddenly my skill playing with rags is much better than your skill playing with garbage, because clearly you can't handle somebody passing you the wrong cards.
You can't say that. No, people will light you on fire. Cut this out of the episode. No. Everyone needs to follow and read the signals. There's no way that in a draft scenario you could consider nuking the pod as strategic. No one would do that at all. Not even one person.
Well, but I mean, I'm sure
/ sarcasm.
Yeah, it's definitely happened. But ultimately, at that point, that just makes you look like a weaker player. If you are bad because the person to your right was bad, then what the hell does that mean? Like, what does that say about you?
Dude, yes, 100%. That is something that resonates with me deeply when people take to social media to say that this is ruining their elo because someone in my pod definitely just screwed us all. I can't believe this. Oh my God. It's like you're sitting down to play a card game. RNG exists. We can acknowledge that. But at some point, are you going to take responsibility for your own choices as well? Because don't you get to pick a card? Don't you get to pick, like, can't you read the fact that someone's in that pod trying to do weird things? You can't always fix it, but you gotta polish a turd. And it's up to how well you can polish at the end of the day. And some people not interested in learning how to polish.
I'm going to look up the exact episode of Mythbusters polishing a turd. It is, let's see. What episode was this? It was season 5, episode 12. Jamie Heineman and Adam Savage polish a turd, and it comes out sparkling. So it can be done, friends. The Mythbusters did it. I want to run through some questions here because we're a little fired up, and we like that. But we've got some questions from the audience.
Fire at will.
Pitchatumi says, how do you think LSS will bolster the action point economy in the face of the Light Sentinel loop? And at what point does the community's criticism of these cards become toxic? I'm just going to say it's already toxic. Like, it already is. It already is.
Okay, bolster the action point economy? We don't need to. Okay, so let's look at, the Light Sentinel loop is predicated on you not having the ability to generate a second action point to follow up with your turn and break out of this cycle of them playing Light Sentinel. That card, or multiple cards, I should say, exist in the game of Flesh and Blood at generic for anyone to splash that in. 1, Time Skippers. 2, Time Snap Potion, which is a huge one that has been played ever since the beginning of the game because it existed in the first set. And then Lead the Charge, which came out in Arcane Rising. All of those have the capacity to do exactly what the Prism player doesn't want you to do. Now, the question is, are you choosing to build your deck in such a way that you factor that in? I will tell you right now that I have been playing a ton of Kasai. I've been playing a ton of Kasai since she came out, basically. But I stopped for a bit to jump back on Dromai, and then I played Kano, and then I went down the meme rabbit hole and played Brainstorm Kano, and yes, I do that. But then I came back to Kasai, and you know the first thing that I did when I came back to Kasai like 3 days ago?
Tell me.
I'm seeing if you could guess it.
I don't know.
It's really straightforward. I took out one blue. That was a Dromai blue. I took out This Round's on Me, and I swapped in Time Snap Potion. That was it. That's all. Step 1, Time Snap Potion and sideboard. And then I cut one other card for a second copy because I'm not sure if I want to maybe, if that one thing happens and I need to play that, maybe I'll side that in for an extra blue. That was an easy change for me to make. This is not a difficult thing to do. Like some decks, Viserai, for example, already plays Lead the Charge. Now, Viserai kind of hated on, probably going to continue to get hated on now that Azalea's back and Warmonger's Diplomacy is going to be back on the menu. But the fact that he already plays a card that completely dismantles this is a sign that it is very possible for any deck in the format to pick up one of those tools. Like, they do this already. Do you know how many hate cards have been printed for Kano? Yes, the answer is yes. All of the cards in the history of Flesh and Blood now hate on Kano. Like, there's not a single. So, Legend Story Studios is really good at this. They are good at giving a very powerful effect to someone and then printing so many stupid ass cards that stop you from playing Wildfire for 6. I don't like that, but it exists and you can play those cards. Congratulations to all of you who don't want to die to Wildfire. It exists in the game of Flesh and Blood. I don't think that we need some massive revamp on action point economy. Hey, Scabskin leathers, that exists. people aren't happy about that.
Yeah,
so, no, I don't think they need to revamp it.
The Scabskin haters realized that Light Sentinel's a thing and then revoked their Scabskin hatred to do that. Listen, the worst take I heard about this Light Sentinel thing was that they're not going to touch it because they need to sell boxes of Mistveil, so they need to keep Illusionist relevant. And I was like,
wait. Okay, they're not going to stop the Light Illusionist card because the Mystic Illusionist is going to
because Illusionist is going to get some help with Mistveil. So they want people to
make it make sense. Make it make sense.
That's why I tried to inquire. I said just to confirm, you're saying that a card printed in Monarch is there to push sales. I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, and that was at that point. Hey, I'm like, look, and this is one of the things where it's like,
you know what? That's a valid question to whoever asked that question. Totally valid question, and it's one that should be explored. In my opinion, I don't think they need to do anything as far as action point economy is concerned. I think it's totally fine. I think they've done a great job of building in generics. I'm just flabbergasted that people would like stand up and say this needs to change when the cards exist.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, we already had this discussion, but I agree with you. There are multiple options that exist at the generic rarity that aren't expensive, that are like commons that you can acquire to circumvent this and deal with it. All right, let's get a little more less serious as we wrap up.
Okay, I'm ready to get a little more less serious.
Our boy Ming from 1-2 Juice.
Right.
One of my favorite people says, and I don't understand this reference, nor do I understand the severity or the sheer, I don't know, like urgency of this, how this is framed. But he says, and I quote, "Gun to your nuts. How many Ferg burgers is too many Ferg burgers for dessert?"
Wait, what do you mean you don't understand that reference?
I don't understand the gun to your nuts part. Like I
thought you didn't remember our wonderful Ferg burger.
Oh, I remember Ferg burger. So
good God.
Maybe for those who don't know, can you regale them about what the Ferg burger experience was for us?
All right, so when we were in Queenstown, the last dinner that we all had together was at it was like an Asian fusion place, and it was like they brought course 1, and it was like like a small appetizer, and it was pretty delicious. They brought course 2, and it was like a small appetizer. It was pretty delicious. They brought course 3. It was like I don't know, like lamb or something like that. It's like, oh, this is pretty good. Course 4 comes around, and people are like, okay, this is a great thing that we're doing here. We've enjoyed ourselves for the past 2 hours. This is going very well. I'm having a great time. Course 5 comes. And at this point, people are starting to glance around and wonder, are these people just going to continue this process until we leave? At what point is this like one of the stages of hell, and they're just going to start force feeding the food down with their haunches into our gullets? Like, is that the place that we're in? It was delicious, but we got to like course number 7, and I think people were panicking a little bit stepping outside to reevaluate life decisions. I had conversations with LSS devs standing outside at like 11:35 p.m. after 7 courses of food, and we were perhaps fearing for our lives. Nevertheless, that wrapped up, and by wrapped up, I mean it kept going, and you and I left along with some others. And what did we do along with the 1-2 Juice crew and Jason? We decided that we were gonna go eat food. So we went over to Ferg Burger, which was like a block down literally on the same street, I think. We just walked a block like down the street, and at like midnight, we decided that we were going to purchase Ferg Burgers and eat them for dessert.
Yes.
Which, by the way, they were actually serving dessert at the time that we did this.
Yeah,
which was the best part.
Because while we were doing that, I think Elliot from 1-2 Juice went to go get a donut and a hot chocolate. So you and I and was it Jason Lai? I think it was. We got burgers, and they were, first of all, they were delicious. So how many Ferg burgers is too many? Any for dessert was too many already. But we had decided, because I think this was a plan for all of us to go to Ferg Burger for 3 days. We were like, we're going to go. But every time we went, it was either a lineup around the block. And so this dessert or this dinner thing, we had, I think, all come to the conclusion. We're like, eat light. This is going to end around like 9:30. We can go for a walk, hang out, and then like maybe later on in the evening we'll go grab a Ferg Burger. And dinner ended at like 11:30. Well, yeah. I say ended. We left.
We left. It did not end.
It did not
continued.
But we got
several people were having a fantastic time with the spirits that were flowing. We'll put it that way. Imbibing off the charts. I don't want to name names, but there were people that were smiling something fierce.
Yes, there was
laughing.
Good amount of wine. Good amount of wine to be had. Alex Norville and his partner were there as well. It was a lot of fun. So that's your answer.
I like how those two things were completely independent. So people were having a lot of wine. Alex Norville was there. Like you're implying something, but no, he's not implying it. They were just there. We were just all eating Ferg Burger at the end of that, which was pretty impressive.
Next question. This is how many sleeves is too many sleeves from Playtime TCG?
Oh, I saw this one. I replied to this one on Twitter because it was too good not to reply to. So I used the Mean Girls GIF. You know the one?
Yeah.
I say GIF, but everyone says GIF. I used the Mean Girls one. Was the limit does not exist.
The limit does not exist.
If we can get more on there, let's go. Let's do it. I think next time we're together, there's a video that I think we need to put together, and we need to get going. And I think I have.
Is it the bathtub playing cards one?
Yeah. I think we need to. Well, I think we need to go further. I think we need to get underwater in a pool, man.
Oh, that's fine.
I think we need to see if we can go completely underwater and go to the bottom and play a round of Flesh and Blood.
That seems more like a Texas thing than a Toronto thing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I got pools here. Come on over. I mean, I don't have them. Like, I don't own them, but there are pools that exist in the state of Texas. So, yeah, come on down.
Sweet.
And we'll do it up.
Sweet.
I was talking to Brody. He's interested too. So
Brody's the man. Brody is just the guy.
Calling winner, Brody Spurlock. Celebrational champion, Brody Spurlock. Creator of Silent Auction, Brody Spurlock.
Wait for the Twitter discourse on that card being printed.
No,
they wouldn't.
No discourse whatsoever.
They wouldn't. From the Armed Pit asking, is DM Armada still deciding on going full time? If he does, will the plan be to create more videos like the 6-sleeve deck?
I am still deciding. I don't talk about like my hopes and dreams a lot because I feel like in doing so I'm being like, I don't know, arrogant or like audacious, and I don't like being someone who puts themselves out as like better than others because I don't think of myself that way. And so I struggle to talk about it or make decisions like that because I don't know, I feel like there's a lot that goes into it that I feel like there's a lot that goes into it. I am definitely still trying to decide if it's possible for me to provide for my family and also do this full time. And it would take a lot. It would take very miraculous circumstances for me to do that, but it is something that I deeply desire to do. Like I very much want to be someone that creates things for the game of flesh and blood that I don't have the time or the resources to create right now. And I would love to create more videos like the 6-sleeve video. That's my favorite video I've ever made. That and the 8-sleeve video are my two favorite videos I've ever made because they are exactly like they capture exactly what I love about card games, and that's doing fun things with great people. And why would I not want to make more of those types of videos? You know what I mean?
Well, I wish you well on that. You know I'm in your corner all the time.
I do know that.
This one coming from Poxonus for Flake and DM Armada. For your casting gigs, what are some cool behind-the-scenes moments that don't make it to the streams that y'all wish more people knew about? Does anything come up to mind for you?
I mean, we always bring it up that after we're done, we go and eat pizza silently in our hotel rooms.
Yeah.
So that one's an easy slam dunk. But is there anything else that like pops up that are really interesting or like kind of cool moments? I think the fundamental problem with this question is the idea that we have time outside of these massive 12-hour streams.
So I think maybe part of it is just like, in terms of behind the scenes, like what a lot of people might not get is during those like brief little breaks or here or there, it's, in my opinion, Stephen, it's like our interactions with whoever's running the show, be it Peter at MinMax or Keith at Realm or whatever it is. It's when we have a stupid idea and we approach, we're like, hey, we want to do some really weird thing, but we need like a pack of this, a pack of this, and a pack of this. And it'll make for like a fun 10-minute segment. And they're just like, here you go. Or like, hey man, like we need a box of like whatever you have spare that you don't care about us ripping open because we have like a bit that we want to do or a giveaway we want to do. Like a lot of the fun part is that we go in with probably 10% of what we're planning on doing for that particular day in our mind, where it's just like, and that doesn't even count the casting. It's like, oh, well, we could talk about this and we'll talk about this and maybe we'll do that giveaway. And then throughout the course of each day, you and I are always going off the rails, or we'll find something early in the day, some reference or some, you know, like there was that one where for the rest of the day, we just started making Steven Seagal jokes or something like that. You know, like they just kept coming back. That to me, I think is the fun behind the scenes part, where it's a little bit of creativity and scrambling that goes on when the "we'll be right back" screen goes on, because it's not like we sit back, take a sip of water and say, hey, good job. It's like, okay, run to pee, come back. What kind of stupid idea do we have that we can execute with the limited stuff that we have near us?
I think this is a fun like callback. We a long time ago were asked to do, what was it? It was like calling Singapore or something like that via stream, like the top 8 of that. And I don't know if it's just an interesting moment for both of us, because it was like 3 a.m. when we were supposed to kick on. And like, I know, for example, I was like fighting to not fall fully asleep before like we got the random text that said, hey, it's starting, so that we could go live and like actually cast for like 3.5 hours until the sun rose, so that we could all kind of experience the top 8 of calling Singapore together. There was a moment where like I legit had to like message you in Discord like, hey, cover for me, because I had to step away because I felt like I was about to vomit from being up for too long. And then I went and I ate like a biscuit or something and came right back and felt right as right. Like weird stuff like that happens. People talking to your ear like in extended sentences about like lunch plans that they're going to be ordering for you, and you're like in the middle of breaking down like a play line. Like those are fun moments.
Oftentimes what you'll hear is, and this is a little clue in for those who listen, is that if you ever are listening to two casters who otherwise have very good chemistry and are always on the ball talking back and forth, if one of them is talking longer than they typically would and the reply from the other person has nothing to do with what they said, there's a good chance that that person either went to the bathroom or was writing down their coffee and or lunch order on a piece of paper and talking to somebody, because they'll just jump in and be like, and now a snatch for 4. And it's like, it has nothing to do with the whole conversation about Frostbites and
Or
Icelander.
they'll repeat back what was just said in a slightly different way. You know what I mean? They'll be like, and also it's really important to note that there is one Frostbite on the board. And the guy's like next is like, I literally just said that there's one Frostbite on the board and it's going to make the next thing cost 1 more. And then don't forget, it's going to cost 1 more with that Frostbite. That's how you know someone was just telling them that there's about to be a tape delayed judge call at the table. And it turns out that this one player is having to step away so that they can resolve the card that flipped over. Like, stop saying that in my ear and I will cover that when it comes time. We got this.
The better question... Stuff. I think this is a question that's so well directed to somebody like Ethan Van Sant, because Ethan, I remember I was talking to Ethan in Philadelphia and he was telling me about how, he has to play producer, like showrunner, judge to a degree, like just making sure that the game state is fine and whatever. Like that guy has so much on his plate that when we have to just write down our Starbucks order, there are times where Ethan is just straight up gets up away from the computer and runs to go find a judge because something's going on and there's like no other person to sort of handle it. So Ethan, being the superhero that he is just like bam, and then it's just us like talking about stuff, and yeah,
that's kind of what we do though.
That is our job. There you have it.
Man, I miss casting. I want to jump in.
You will be.
Get on that booth.
There's a little spoiler for some people. I won't tell anybody what it is, but when it happens...
I want to know.
You'll know. All right. That does it for our episode of Instant Speed number 121. I want to say a big thank you again to our... sponsors at the Realm Games. So go to therealmgamingnetwork.com. I've got another $10 of store credit to give away. And I want somebody, one of you beautiful listeners, to, in the comments of this video, what do they get? What should they tell us, Stephen? I'll let you. You're good at this. Well, I mean, the previous one was, what format do you want Worlds to be, or do you think Worlds should be? Maybe something that's, a little bit...
Oh, I got this.
Go for it.
Okay. What is the coolest card so far revealed from Part the Mist Veil? What is your, in your opinion, what is the coolest card? And we could even go so far as to say, what's the coolest Transcend card of all the arts that they showed? Have you seen those, by the way? Those things are incredible.
They are incredible. They're beautiful.
Which one is the coolest? Out of all of the Transcend cards, which one looks the coolest?
I like it. But tell us why. You can't just slam a name of a card there, because I will not pick you as the winner. You got to give me some reasoning. And it doesn't have to be the best. It just has to be the one you're most passionate about. Yeah. So tell us, what's your favorite Transcend card, and tell us why. And if I pick you, you will find out on the next episode of Instant Speed, and you will score $10 of store credit at the Realm Gaming Network. All right. That is it. Big ups to our Patreon supporters. Patreon Tier 3, you will stick around, right, Stephen? Because we've got a little Go Again action that will be locked and loaded for Sunday. So if you're a Patreon Tier 3 supporter, you will get that. And if you're not, hey, I invite you for as little as $2 a month. You can go to patreon.com/instantspeed. Support the channel. It goes miles. Trust me. It means a lot to me. So thank you so much.
These are some really good questions that we're about to answer too. I have a couple of very interesting answers for some of these.
Well, I'm going to ask Stephen questions like, hey, Stephen, what was the first autograph you ever signed? What was the last book you read, Stephen? How about this? What's the best gift you have ever received? All this and plenty more on Go Again. Stephen, people know who you are. People know how to get to you, but remind those who might, before you leave Twitter also.
Yeah, right before I quit.
Yeah.
If you wanted to find me on Twitter so you can at me for my hot takes on this episode, check out Armada_DM. If you want to check me out on YouTube, it's youtube.com/DM Armada, all one word. And then you can find me on just a litany of other social media sites by the handle DM Armada. So check it out, and we'll do card game stuff together.
I love it. And I have been giving the opportunity to my guests on this show, Stephen, to go ahead and say the line. You can say it. Tark tried. He failed twice. Yuki Bender bailed him out on the last episode. Do you know the line I'm talking about?
I hope it's the one that I'm about to say, because I want to say it.
Well, friends, be kind to one another, Stephen.
And remember, everybody, you're not losing if you're learning.
Beauty. See you next time on ISP.
Well, I work